we're trying to get students to think. If you can get 2 or more students to discuss the issues behind a particular issue, that then stimulate this sort of thinking, which is what we're trying to achieve here. So the last thing that these are all issues so far that I've kept separate from my own central reason for building a new a new software system in LAP initially was the certainty-based marking, and that's also something that I think it's quite important to look at as being a major thing that can improve the efficiency of self-tests. So I want to go on to talk a bit about certainty-based marking. I can see that various people have put in comments here. I'm not paying attention to them obviously at the moment, but do tell me if there's something I should be looking at in the text box. So certainty-based marking, what's that all about? Well, it's basically a very simple set of marks that the students will get given depending on their response. The students are asked when they give an answer to a question, they're asked not only what their answer is, of course, but how sure they are with their degree of certainty in the correctness of their question. And there are 3 options basically. They can, of course, also not reply at all, in which case they'll get no marks down here. But they can opt for C equals 1, C equals 2, or C equals 3. And if they got the answer right, then that's the number of marks they'll get. They'll get 3 marks if they're sure it's right, and they'll get only 1 mark if they express low certainty for the correctness of their answer. It's obviously good if they're sure of the answer. It's obviously good to express high certainty for it. But if they express high certainty for it and they get it wrong, then they're in some trouble because they get -6 for it. So they'll get double negative marking if they express high confidence for something they're actually getting wrong. If they express low confidence, if they accept and acknowledge that there's some uncertainty about their answer, maybe they know that they haven't really learned the issue at stake, or maybe they maybe they feel the question is ambiguous, or they don't understand some part of it, then they shouldn't be confident in their answer, and this is reflected by they're motivated to express this low confidence because there's no penalty if they get it wrong. They'll only get 1 mark if they get it right if they're unconfident about it, but they'll get no penalty if they get it wrong. So what they need, roughly speaking, to think about is how likely it is that they're going to get the answer right. And we'll come on to look at this in quantitative terms in a minute, but basically they're wanting to think about how probable it is that they'll be marked right, and if that's more than 80%, if they think there's more than an 80% chance of being right on it, then they should go for C equals 3. So the way in which this helps the learning process through self-tests is that in order to do well, you're going to not just plump for an answer that is the first thing that can go ahead. You need to think about whether you can really justify being sure about it. In order to justify being sure about it, sometimes you come up with just, if I ask you what's the capital of France, then I'm sure everybody will come up with the correct answer for that, and they'll be darn sure that they're getting it right, and they don't really need to think any more about that. But if I ask you what is the capital of Germany, perhaps you need to think about, oh, well, yeah, it used to be Bonn, but now it's changed. Is it changed to Hamburg? No, it's Berlin. It's changed to, of course, with the unification of Germany. You need to think about some other knowledge that may be a little bit relevant. If I ask you what is the capital of Estonia, depending on whether you know anything about Estonia, you may be very sure of it. You may have to think about, now, is this city in Estonia, or is it in Latvia, or whatever? You need to link to your other knowledge in order to try to justify whether you're sure or not. And you may, as a part of that, you may end up thinking, really, you don't know whether it's one thing or another. If there are uncertainties, then the thinking about it, so I've come on to arrows here. It's equally important to identify uncertainties If you can see that there are reasons for reservation about your answer, then you know that you shouldn't be going for high certainty about that, because there's quite a risk that you'll get a -6. You should be going for one of the lower two options. And if you really think you're pretty unsure, then you should go for c equals 1. If it's sort of in between, or you can't make up my mind whether it's sort of below or above that threshold, then you can go for c equals 2 as a sort of hedge there. Just the way I think most of the students treat this certainty-based marking as a two-option thing, I think. C equals 3 or c equals 1, or can't I make up my mind, so I'll go for c equals 2. And that's reflected in, commonly, when we look at the statistics about that, only about 20% of the responses are c equals 2, and depending on how well they know the subject, the other 80% is divided maybe half and half between c equals 1 and c equals 3, or towards exams sometimes. For the good students, obviously, they're knowing most of the answers, and c equals 3 is much more used.
Tony, would you mind if I just ask a question here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I was just wondering about your thoughts on the use of negative marks and how students relate to that. Because just the comment you're making there about how many people pick C1, C2, C3, because you would have seen large numbers of data sets, presumably from these. When I look at this, and this is what I've reflected on before when I've looked at the certainty-based marking, I mean, if I were a student, I would be thinking about playing how am I going to maximize my marks here, or how am I going to minimize the negative marks that I might get? And would students just then be saying, well, look, what's the point of going for a C3 unless I know that I'm absolutely 100% sure? I mean, surely if I had any uncertainty, I would go for perhaps say a C1 rather than, like, there'd be no point doing no reply. Presumably you do a reply and just say C1 because it's still 0 on the marking scheme that you've got up there. But let's say that I thought, well, I think it might be this, but if I put C2 and I get it wrong, then I'm -2. Would I be better off just putting C1? Because at least then I'd get 1 mark if I was right, but I get 0 if I'm incorrect, rather than -2.
You're asking absolutely the critical questions, and I am going to want, actually, in the next slide to discuss basis of that. A lot of people are kind of scared of negative marks. A lot of teachers actually say that you shouldn't give students negative marks. It's like slapping them when they get something wrong. You should give them carrots and not use sticks. One of the our students used to be familiar with a scheme in which we were basically using ±1 or equivalent to ±2 marks here. They would get on their true-false exam questions, they get 1 mark if they got it right, and they get -1 marks if they got it wrong. And people have suggested that negative marks are just a disincentive in some way to students feeling good about the exam process. One of the things that the students really liked when we introduced the certainty-based marking scheme was the fact that they could opt for C equals 1, where they weren't going to get a negative mark. But also they can see that they could clearly, in a lot of situations, we're talking about some of these ones where you really were very sure, like the example I gave, if I ask you what's the capital of Paris, nobody is going to go for C equals 1 on that, because you know that you're not going to make a mistake. So they could opt to avoid the negative marks here, and they could opt to take the risk of a negative mark because they knew it was a very small risk. What one is trying to do really here is get the students to distinguish between questions that they have reliable knowledge about and questions that they don't have reliable knowledge about. The issue of whether students are motivated to respond sensibly and in a way that optimizes their marks is something that I want to get onto in just a minute, if that's okay. Shall I carry on and talk just about this business about misconceptions? Because one of the other sort of qualitative things about this is what happens when the students do get this -6. If they've expressed confidence for something that they've put down, they get marked wrong, then this is basically indicating, usually indicating that they have a misconception. They really thought something was true, which is not true, and they are woken up, if you like. This double negative mark, it hurts in a sense. They're going to have to get 2 marks or 3 in order to compensate for having lost those 6 marks. So this helps to get them to look hard at the explanations that may be on offer, to think about exactly what it was that they were thinking that led them to put down this wrong answer, and to go through the various thinking processes that help them to learn from that experience. This is the situation they're really strongly learning from making their mistakes. So these are some of the kinds of things that in student surveys that the students said they really liked about the system when we introduced them in a sort of qualitative kind of way, that they could see that it was really important to distinguish between things that they were sure about and things that they knew that they were partly guessing at. So I'd like to come on to the question that Geoffrey was just asking about how you should actually decide which certainty level you should choose in a particular situation, and whether there's a sort of sense in which you could be a gambler or not a gambler, or you could decide that it was beneath your dignity ever to express anything less than c equals 3. What I have here is a graph which is on the bottom, on the horizontal axis here, where you are between 0% and 100%, is what you're thinking about how likely you are to be correct. If the question is about the capital of Paris, then you know you're somewhere up here, that kind of region. Maybe you'd extend it down there if you think that maybe you had a little bit too much to drink or whatever. Maybe there's something in the question that you haven't really noticed. But you're pretty sure you're getting it right. If I ask you about Estonia and you have no knowledge at all about Estonia, the likelihood that you're going to get the answer right is somewhere down here. You're going to be very unlikely. If I ask you a true-false question, and out of an exam in which true-false questions, roughly half of them are true and half of them are false, then and if you don't know anything about it, you're completely guessing, then you're going to be in the 50% kind of range. So depending on your knowledge, you may be somewhere along this axis here. And this is what we're trying to get students to think about. How reliable is my knowledge about this? How likely is my answer to be correct? Okay, so what is on the vertical axis here is the mark you'd expect to get on which for these different probabilities of being correct. So, and there are 3 heavy lines on this. Or let's take first of all the dashed line here. If you give no reply, then you're going to get no marks. So on average, and indeed every time, you're going to get no marks if you don't reply. Let's suppose you are guessing. Now, if you are guessing, then the probability that you get the answer right is going to be somewhere in this range, depending on the type of question it is. If it's a numerical or a text question and you're totally guessing, then you have practically a 0 chance of getting it right. If it's a true-false question, then you have 50% chance by guessing of getting it right. So you're somewhere in this range. You can see from this that even if it's a total guess, you're always best to put down an answer at c equals 1, because this blue line is always above the 0. It's always better than no reply. You might get it right, even if it might be quite a small chance of getting it right. You're not risking a penalty in any kind of way, so this one is always better than no reply. Okay, but you do very badly indeed to put down c equals 3 for something in this range, because you'd be on average getting 3 minus more 4 minus 6 kind of range. So clearly, if you think there's only a low likelihood of right, even if you think that there's a 50% chance you get the capital of Estonia right, then you're going to be better off to put c equals 1